All right, so hello everyone. I'm really honored to be here today and share the stage with so many inspiring creators here. My name is Massimo Guarini, and I'm a founder and CEO of a boutique development studio, game development studio called Ovosonico. We're based in northern Italy, and we're a small studio comprised of 17 people. And we released our first title in 2014, Murasaki Baby, published by Sony Computer Entertainment Europe. And we just announced last month our next title coming out August 31st this year, the last day of June, which is today, by the way. Today is the last day of June, so it's a sign. What I'd like to talk to you today is basically, we're talking about video games and how video games are today capable of dealing with several different subjects, and they're actually maturing to a really great expression medium. But at the same time, they sort of fail to reach a broader audience, to reach really everyone. So before starting Ovosonico, I had a long experience in AAA development. I've been working with Ubisoft at Ubisoft Montreal with huge teams comprised of hundreds to 200 people. And then I moved to Japan because that was my dream, and I wanted to really try to, get a hold of the Japanese gaming industry and culture. And I had the honor to have this experience with Goichi Suda, the grasshopper manufacturer, directing Shadows of the Damned. After that, so my career has always been like a sort of like, I went from big companies to smaller ones up to the point where I founded my own small studio. So it's like a sort of like reverse career as opposed to what people normally do. They start for smaller studios and then boom, they go up to AAA development. And Ovosonico for Wheels was about the time for me to actually focus on things that I really wanted to communicate somehow to the audience, to different audiences. And that probably has also something to do with the fact that as a creator, I'm also growing older. So I'm not 20 years old anymore. And it's part of a process, of a personal process, like any one of us, right? So whenever you grow older, you maybe change your tastes or you want to have access to different things. And that's totally fine. It doesn't really deny other things that, have been made before. And Ovosonico was kind of like my tentative to actually talk in a different way somehow. But before we start, so the question I'd like to, think about with you today is really why video games are failing at reaching broader audiences. So before we start, I want to give you 3 statements, right, that tells a bit more about myself. First one is, I hate music. I hate music. Any one of you is hating music? I really can't stand music. Sound waves, not for me. I also hate movies. Never go to cinema. I don't like stories. It just irritates me. And I hate video games. That's a big deal. So I just made 3 statements, and I'm pretty sure 2 of these statements sound weird. Not one. I mean, there's one that doesn't really sound weird in 2017. But the other 2 don't. So if someone really comes to you and says, hey, I hate music, I mean, that's probably going to be your reaction, because it doesn't make sense. You cannot just dismiss music as a whole. You may not like, I don't know, death metal music. I like it, by the way. You may not like dance music. I don't know. I mean, you may not like genres. But you cannot say, I don't like music as a whole. You cannot dismiss the art form in total. And the same thing goes with movies. If someone comes to you and say, I hate movies, say, what are you talking about? And maybe you hate comedies. Maybe you hate horror movies. Maybe you had TV series. Actually, nobody hates TV series lately. But you just, just shut up, right? But when you say, I mean, it happened to me quite a lot, and I'm sure it happened to anyone here, to hear this sentence, I hate video games. This happens to me especially when they ask me, okay, what do you do for a living? And I go like, I make games. And people go like, okay. It's like, they either think about video games as the slot machines, the bars, or as something which I know the video game industry is making more billions than the movie industry, and I know we're maturing into something big, so it's obvious and it's a fact that the game industry is something big. So it is socially accepted, but still, if you talk to people that are not really into numbers or businesses or anything of this, but just like consume media as we do, it's very common, right, to accept the notion that an entire art form, because I consider video games as an art form, can get dismissed like this. Boom. No way. So my question is really, I started asking to myself, how is that possible? I mean, it's really, really weird. And it shouldn't be like this, especially since we're in 2017, we're not like in the 80s anymore. So I started thinking about the reasons why people are basically scared about video games, even though we're living in a sort of golden age, as far as I'm concerned, where games are really starting to talk different languages, and games are really starting to show some diversity, as opposed to what happened 10 years before, for example. So I started thinking, reasoning, very generically speaking, about what kind of tools do movies and music use to communicate to people. So obviously, we're talking very broadly here, but movies, they use images. Acting, of course, and story, but they are communicated through the images. And music uses sounds. Melodies, of course, interpretations, but we can broadly say it's the sound, it's a sound wave, it's like, the quality of the sound wave as well, like if it's a bass note, it's a high note, it's a melodic one, it's not a melodic one. So those two things are always leading to an emotional response. Because when we watch movies, we basically exercise empathy towards the characters, the story. We feel like, why do we like watching movies? Because we actually live an experience which just like unplugged from our ordinary lives, and for a moment we leave the story of the characters. So there is an exercise in empathy. With music, I believe it's much more primordial, because music can really get us excited, and you don't even know why. But there's music that makes you really sad. There's music that makes you want to destroy the world. There's music that makes you want to jump. So it's an emotional response from us at a very direct primordial level. What video games do? Games in general. Games, by definition, are a set of rules with a goal. I know we have stories, we have music, we've had all of the art forms concurring into making a game something like a unique experience, and that's fine. But if we talk again, very, broadly speaking, games are, by definition, a set of rules. There's a goal, there are rules. If we remove the rules and the goal, it becomes a toy, which is also fine. But because of this language, because of the fact that we're even calling video games, like, it had a special meaning probably 30 years ago. Probably it's about time we reconsider that, because like the video and the game together, I believe, helps getting into people's mind like a sort of like vintage image of what video games are today. But they actually communicate to us through challenge. So whenever you have a set of rules and a specific goal, you feel there's a challenge, and you want to overcome the challenge, and you want to win, maybe. You want to prove yourself. It's clear that emotions are universal. I mean, everyone here feels emotion. But probably not everyone, well, probably yes, everyone in this room, but let's say on a broader audience type room, not everyone is interested in challenges. So I can say it's pretty obvious that the group of people that actually are interested in taking over a challenge or winning something is very much smaller than a global audience of people that gets moved by emotions. And traditionally, because of the very nature of the challenge, I would say that age range of people who are really into challenges and winning and being competitive is somewhere between 15 to 25 years old. Which leads to another consideration. Normally in this age bracket, these are the kind of interests that we all had, and we all have. And that's, again, it's perfectly fine. We'd all be nerds about something. I've been a huge nerd for Aliens, for example. Not Star Wars, so I'm kind of like an exception more than a rule. But that's the main level of interest that we have at that age. So it's about science fiction, fantasy, war, whatever includes explosions and weapons. It's cool. It's, you know, it's liberating. It's what specifically male teenagers need, right, as a sort of like way of discharging their power, their angst. And zombies, of course, they cannot be removed from the equation. And that's a very specific vertical niche, I believe, when compared to what could be a global audience of people. I like to make comparison with the movie industry just because they have like a little bit more advantage in terms of time. They exist much longer than video games do. So imagine for a second what the movie industry would look like if it was like the video game industry today. We probably would have like a couple of genres revolving about 2 or 3 things. So I want to be very clear, though, and because, you know, as game developer, we tend to think in absolute terms. So I really want to be clear about something. I'm not trying to dismiss or dismissing these kind of games, right? I'm not calling for an end of epic shooters, violence in games, or anything like that. I think we need these games, actually. It makes perfect sense then the market allows people to buy these games. To me, the problem is not what we have, but the problem is what we don't have. So it's never about criticizing what is already on the market. It's about asking ourselves, as creators or as game developers, why cannot we talk to, you know, people that have other interests? Why can't I reach with my idea somebody who will probably be much more interested in my game than, you know, the vertical niche of core gamers, if we really want to use that label. I personally hate labels, so even the notion of calling ourselves gamers, it doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, it's like calling people who go to the cinema moviegoers or like music lovers. You don't really do that. Everybody goes to the cinema, everybody listens to music. So there's no need, and everybody plays video games, so there's no need to use labels, in my opinion. And that's also something that again, concurs in actually creating this closed image, this kind of like closed private club image that video game unfortunately have when considering a broader society. So I'd like to think for a second about, again, a comparison with the movie industry, about movie genres. There might be probably a communication issue or something like that within the game industry to the external, to the exterior. You know, these are movie genres: romance, comedy, thriller, drama, action, and whatever you want to add to the list. But they have all something in common. They sort of trigger an emotional response into people's mind. They all refer somehow to a range of emotions, right? So if I go and look for a new movie and I see it's a thriller movie, I know what to expect emotionally, regardless of the story. If I choose to go for an action movie, I know what to expect, but again, kind of emotionally speaking, because action movies are also triggering specific emotions in our mind and in our body. I'm feeling sad, I had a bad day, I go back home, it's late, I want to just like relax and watch a comedy movie, because I know that comedy gives me that sort of like, okay, unplug for a second, see something really stupid, have a laugh. Back to video games. This is how we call video games genres today: first-person shooters, platform game, survival game, real-time strategy, racing game, and the list goes on. So what is the difference here? They're all talking about game mechanics. They're not referring to anything else but what is mechanically the game all about. It's a first-person shooter because you shoot and you're in first-person view. That's fine, it's the technical definition of it, but wouldn't be that an action game? Why don't we really say that? Or better, we do say that, but it's still very much needed to sell a game, to actually refer to games with these kind of general labels. Again, if the movies and game industry would like behave somehow like the game industry today, that's what we would call movies or music. Like, oh yeah, there's a 24 FPS movie coming out this week, it's really interesting. And there's also this long sequence shot from this new director, and I suggest you to watch it. Close-ups, they're awesome. But think about music, 3/4 polyrhythm stuff. You know, it doesn't really make sense. That's not how we would describe music. You know, even so in music, like calling it rock and roll, it's like we're even describing an attitude, a social attitude, as opposed to, you know, technical stuff. I believe, as an industry, we already kind of like started to asking ourselves, all right, probably we're not communicating in the right way, and especially when I was back, about 10 years ago, there's been like a trend in the game industry so that everybody got worried about how we can reach a sort of like the casual gamer audience. And it started to look like this a little bit, like, you know, moving from, okay, it's for us to it's for everyone. And Nintendo did a great job in that, actually. But everybody else was kind of, including ourselves, we were kind of like trying to race against something, some enemy, imaginary enemy, and try to say, okay, maybe we just need to make the games easier. Easy means more accessible. I don't know, I don't think that's the solution, and probably since 10 years have passed, we have all seen that's not the right solution. And I recall, like, there was a producer actually in our team that we were creating a very complex game with very complex game mechanics and stuff, so it was really about mastering the controller with 12 buttons and all that stuff. And they came to us as a team and they said, okay, guys, make sure I can play this game with one hand, with a gamepad on one hand, and in the other hand I'm gonna be drinking coffee. That's been like a sort of like a trend in the gaming industry, and games got kind of simplified and automatized in some sort of circumstances as when it comes to gameplay. But I believe that was not the right solution. It was just a way of saying the very same things as before, but somehow dumbed down, somehow in an easier way. But that would be like, you know, having a book, and you need to read a book, and just to make it more accessible, you just like use big fonts and simplify everything, but the content stays the same. It doesn't really make sense. So again, the question that I'm trying to pose to myself and to everyone here is like, is the game industry having a problem communicating outside of what is traditionally its own boundary? I mean, I don't have a precise answer. I feel personally, yes, we do have a problem. But there's so many things that concur in actually building up this problem that is going to still take some time. But we need to, at least the first step for us as game creators, as game developers, should be acknowledging we may have a problem. Acknowledging it's difficult in 2017 to make a game that deals with different subjects and expect this game to have the same commercial results as a game where you shoot at zombies. This is kind of a fact, plus some exceptions, of course, as usual. But it's kind of a fact, and I can see why not everyone is into killing, blood, gore, violence. But that's, again, it's perfectly fine to have that. And I can also see why not everyone wants to save the world or, you know, again, compete against some opponent or things like that. And still, it's completely fine. But the next step is really thinking about how normally do I reach to people, and what is universal, once again, emotion are. So, people normally must relate to something through emotion. That's what they normally do, what they all normally do, every day, in everything we do. So it's like life itself is an ongoing exercise in empathy. And, it's like our soul is resonating with music when we see something, when we hear something. We relate to movies because of the characters and because of the emotional investment we have in them. And I truly believe, really, that we are also starting to have this in games. We don't need to go really back, that much back in the past, but games like Journey started a sort of trend where the focus has been shifted from the game mechanic to the emotional aspect of the game. And I would say the next step for us, and for the game industry as a whole, is actually still trying to blend together emotions and game mechanics, because they cannot be, they need to be intertwined to make sense. It's not like games haven't tried before to be, closer to movies or to music in terms of like trying to deliver in specific emotions. And we did it, there's lots of games that actually have very emotional moments, very cinematic moments. They actually use music in a very clever way, and the production values are so high that, it's like, sitting on a movie theater and watching a Hollywood movie. But are we using the right vocabulary? Isn't that more often than not that we're using vocabularies that are actually taken from other industries to somehow, be applied to what is the game mechanic? So I believe that we still kind of tend to use vocabularies taken from the cinema, from movies industry, and we end up sometimes having games where the gameplay mechanics are there and they're really beautiful. The cinematic parts are right there and they're really beautiful, but they don't really, collaborate too much. It's like applying a nice cinematic moment and stopping the gameplay for a second and then going back to gameplay with a level of reality which is quite different from the cinematics. So it's like trying to borrow symbols and methodologies from other industries. But I think we do have our own vocabulary. And I like to think about gameplay and gameplay mechanics as Lego blocks. Those are the cores, right? The very, at a sort of atomic level, the very core, basic core mechanics that we start from. And by combining these core mechanics, by using them in the way we want, we can build, of course, challenges, because that's what we traditionally do. So imagine like you're combining these Lego blocks to build a specific challenge. But in the same way, I think we can also convey an emotion. But we need to do that using the game mechanic and not just music or animations. I believe this can be done, personally. And, I kind of tried, that's what I wanted to do basically with Ovosonico, and that's what I tried to do, and I struggle every day to experiment and try new things to do, to reach to a point where I'm able to use the actual game mechanic as an expression tool and not just as a challenge tool. So whenever I start, thinking about a new game, I start from thinking about a theme for it. In this case, considering last day of June, the theme was love and loss. They're broad, right? They're really high-level themes. But that's important for me because everything else in the game, as you do with movies, will revolve around this theme. And starting from a very high-level theme allows me to somehow build around it and reverse engineering all the little parts and all the emotional details that make up the theme, and then expand them into game mechanics. But that's my script for a game. Whenever I start a new game, this is literally my script. I basically don't write anything because I want to try to make sure that it's the player who writes the story in his mind. It's kind of tricky task, and it's an ongoing exercise for us. I mean, we're not there yet, probably, and it takes really some time and to figure it out how to make it work. But what we would really like to do is basically start with game mechanics that are intertwined with the theme of the game. And by playing the game, any user will be automatically led to think, to come to some conclusions, right? To understand something, and that's something that is built in the player's mind as an active and a proactive kind of like ally, I would say, into the writing process of the game. That very thing becomes the script of the game. So it's like a silent storytelling approach to games somehow. We don't really tell a story. We rather like to show something, and the story builds up in the player's mind, in the player's imagination. That's what kind of like writing for video games means to me. It's again like breaking down the core mechanics to a sort of atomic level where you have single, meaningful gameplay mechanics, combining them following a specific theme. And that's the way we can actually reach to people somehow, at least trying to reach them in a different way and try to talk about different subjects, still in a very interactive way, because a game needs to be a game. And in this case, really want the player to, have this journey and to experience something through the gameplay, though. And this is like exactly how Last Day of June started in terms of like gameplay design, story design, and I would say as a whole, experience design. So we've just announced the title, and I'd like to show you the announcement trailer that I have here right now. But also, we released today, because it's the last day of June, the new gameplay trailer. So if you actually check out our Facebook page or stuff, you could actually see more about the gameplay. But let's start just with the announcement trailer, because it just sets the mood of the game.
Peggy 12.
All right. So this was the announcement, and we were really, really happy to see how people reacted to this. We got, awards and really nice mentions from the press. I'm really thankful to everyone that played the game and had the chance to play the game at E3. But that's not what I'd really like to focus on, because what really, as a creator and as a human being, touched me was things like reactions like this, both from people and from the press. There still are people, let's not forget this. They're not Twitter accounts or anything like that. But this really is something that when I read it, like, you know, and there's many of these kind of like examples, almost made me cry, because I understood that somehow we managed to communicate something. And that's, again, it's not easy. It's not easy, technically speaking, because designing things like this, it's a challenge, and we're not even close to probably what we want to do, and we're striving in the future to make this better and better and better. But it's even more difficult considering how the products in our industry are normally communicated into a very vertical market. So whenever you feel people that are probably not young anymore, they have kids and they have a family and stuff, relating to something that they've just like played, as opposed to just watching a trailer, that's for me the greatest rewards we can have as a team. And I believe personally that game development is really, really beautiful. We're starting to see diversity within the creators and within the games and within the creations, right? We definitely started to see something. We're starting to see games that can be like experimental, games that can be really, you know, like a punch in the face, like that Dragon Cancer, for example. Games that are starting to tackle subjects that are traditionally not being in video games before. And it would be like really, really bad, I think, to actually look at that wonderful landscape through a small keyhole, right? And that's a little bit what we're doing right now. This is not just because of the market, this is also because of the technology, but this is a whole bunch of like, another bunch of notions, but definitely technology, the very same technology that allows us to bring this fantastic story to you is also the technology that creates a sort of like high entry barrier for normal people to be able to access video games. So it's not just you go home, turn on the TV, and you have video games. No, you have to own a console, you have to own specific hardware, or PC, and make some settings, setups, installation, and upgrades and stuff. So normally, even for me, it takes like 30 minutes before I can actually play a game, because like there's updates, and then maybe I don't turn on the PS4 since forever, and blah, blah, blah. But that's another discussion, but it's more on the content side, which is like the thing that I'm trying to tackle today. It would be really, really sad if we actually had to look at this really beautiful landscape through a small, tiny, tiny keyhole. What we want to do is making sure that our message, your message, whoever's message, whoever wants to create games even in a different way, and you know, in another 10 years, there's going to be new game creators joining in. It's the first time we're actually witnessing a sort of like generational shift. But, you know, it's not like, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we had like creators being mostly between, you know, 25 to 35 years old. Today we have 45 years old creators, even 50 or 60 years old creators. And the same goes for the audience, right? The audience that plays video games is getting wider, and also from an age point of view, it's getting older. So as creators, once again, as developers, we want to make sure that any one of us can reach any other person on planet Earth with his own message. Whatever that message is, that's not happening yet. But again, I'm pretty sure that it's going to take probably 10, 15 years, I don't know. But what I'm pretty sure about is that in 10 years, let's say, if somebody still says, I hate video games, that's going to be your reaction. It doesn't make sense. You would not be able to dismiss video games as a whole, whatever they're going to be called. So video games for me are not children of a lesser God. And thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I don't know if you have time for this. Okay, so if you have any questions about this or about anything related somehow to this, more than happy. Yes? Okay, sorry.
Hi, yeah, I see that in the trailer you used a song by Steven Wilson, who I absolutely love, and the whole mood of everything was very close to what Steven Wilson does. Has he had any more involvement on the project? What's the...
The project was born actually as a collaboration with Steven Wilson, so we took inspiration from one of his videos called Drive On, and we wanted to turn this kind of mood into an interactive experience like this. And the first thing I contacted Steven about the idea of making a video game around his music. His first response was like, video games, I don't really like them. and that's, you know, Steven Wilson has a huge fan base, and every single fan of Steven Wilson knows that he kind of hates video games. And that's also something that, you know, it blew my mind once again, and I said, why? It's not right? Because I can see why you say this, because you probably have a very narrow vision about what games are, and probably the last game he played is like Pac-Man or Galaga or whatever. So I didn't, you know, I didn't quit the idea. So with the team, we started to make a prototype because we really wanted to make that game in any case. And we made this prototype, which is a part on the lake with a couple that you see by the pyre on the lake. And then we made sure that Steven played it, and we showed it to him. And his response after 6 months was, wow, I didn't think video games could be also this. And that's where he basically changed completely his mind and opened up his discography to us. Oh, the microphone is coming.
You said on cinema there is movies of love and those things. Who would be the names of in video games? Directly video games of love, those things, or instead of to change the name of mechanic to use only mechanics, who will be changed?
I think well, the main theme of the game is loss, is love and loss, definitely. And that's being told and experienced by the player through game mechanics, right? So by playing the game, it's like you are playing a sort of like chess match against destiny, and the protagonist of the game basically gets a way to travel back in time, and because regret basically is the main feeling that we wanted to explore in the game, tries to make everything he can to make sure that the crash is avoided. And how he does that, he basically does that through a gameplay mechanic which is very close to the Groundhog Day gameplay mechanic. And now I can say it because it's been announced today, but yeah, you're going to be able to relive the past through not your own eyes, but through the eyes of all the other villagers and characters that actually unknowingly took part into the cause of the crash. So it's like, if we really want to use the old label style, I would consider like a sort of like emotional game with puzzle elements, something like that. Okay. Any other questions?
Hi. First of all, your game seems lovely. I'm eager to play it.
Thank you.
I've noted that video games are not as demonized as they used to be some years ago, but they are accepted as a pedagogical thing. For instance, I once met a father that said that I only let my daughter play with educative games. And like they are only valid if they are educative or pedagogical. What do you think about it?
That's absolutely true. We're getting there. It's an ongoing process. We definitely have much more attention towards video game than we had 10 years ago. That's a given. This is a fact. I'm happy about it. I believe it's still happening within a certain like community of people that anyway knows about video games. Like you were mentioning a father who wants actually to make sure her daughter plays only a certain type of games. Probably that father is already somehow acquainted to video games, that he's used to them, and he knows them, and he knows that there are other kind of video games that can be, you know, sweet for a daughter or anyway useful in terms of like formation or education. So that's great, and I fully support this. What we're not there yet, to me, is, you know, when we have to talk with people that knows really nothing about video games, because 10 or 20 years ago, they knew about the existence of games, but they just dismissed it as a sort of like useless, shallow pastime for kids. So since this is also from a business side, from a market point of view, a huge audience, it's much bigger than, I don't know, the 100 million install base that we could have in terms of console. It's really, really bigger than that. And I think it's just a missed opportunity for us. So we need to reach that audience as well, not just, you know, the one that knows about games. Any other questions? Yeah.
Talking about auditions are your point of view, do you think that massive online games, because I feel that they have a community about the game, and they have the game in common, but they are not like not know how to tell it. The community is outside the game, but they are not doing like your talk inside the game. What do you feel about this?
Well, online gaming in general is like another good portion of gaming, of course, and it just opens up to different considerations. But it makes sense because, like, online means mostly human interaction between human beings. That still, it's being done and ruled by specific rules within the game universe. So the interaction can be good or bad or human or like dishuman sometimes, depending on what the game mechanics goes with. But definitely, and for me, one of the best examples is Journey, because they found this way to actually use the online feature as a sort of like emotional thing, because you're sharing your journey with this other character for a little while, and then you just can recharge, but there's no real goal. It was really kind of like emotional then to discover at the end of the journey the names of the people you played with unknowingly, maybe. It's a huge universe, and it needs to be explored, and again, it's our responsibility to do that. It's our responsibility to go and tackle into the online features as well, and trying probably to use them, because they are a great tool. Probably it's one of the greatest expression tools and interaction tools that we have with other human beings within a game universe. So it's fine to have linear single-player narrative games, but it's also very interesting, and that's something that I'm personally very interested in, to try to, again, come up with a gameplay mechanic that can work in an online environment, but is still able to convey somehow something to people and make people emotionally react to what they're doing. That's one of the greatest challenges, I think. But I don't have an answer yet. All right, looks like my time is over, guys. But I'm going to be sticking around over there, so if you have any other question, more than welcome to see you. And thank you again so much for your time. Thank you.